author of Genesis chapter 2 and Genesis chapter 3, they are giving their reader insight into the unique philosophy within the Bible. Bible philosophy is covered by Moses, not simply a man. I'm not talking literal. Moses is a term delineating religious law. When you hear Moses, that's all Moses is. Bible is covered by Moses. Bible is covered by the philosophy of the religious law. Author of the book of Genesis is doing something completely different. In chapter 1, they are giving you how the religious world is created. Created by the image of God, and the image of God is and can be nothing else, nothing less, nothing more than philosophy of religious law. Decoding the context of what quote-unquote God is from Genesis chapter 1, that is the image of God. Genesis chapter 2 and Genesis chapter 3 kicks in with the idea that what was presented in Genesis chapter 1 is not so wholesome. How do we know? Because a little section has a garden with two lifestyles within it, one connoting Genesis chapter 1's lifestyle and another connoting one unfamiliar to the reader and to the characters therein, which is life, which is soon to be discovered through the mistake of the host of that garden. Author of the book of Genesis is letting their reader know that there is a trend, a continuing trend that is supposed to and will forever continue, and a trend forever continuing at the hand, by the mind, by the pen of a serpent figure. Not literal serpent as we see in real life nature. This is a role that is played by a false prophet that the author calls serpent. Every single generation, serpent will arise. Every single generation, we found this serpent to be Balaam. Every single generation, making this more clear to us in 2024, a Paul will manifest, who is hired. And being hired for the purpose of promoting the agenda from Genesis chapter 1, which is the image of God, the philosophy of that, through new and unique ways to manipulate the mind of the garden and that host therein. What is not so clearly seen throughout the entire Bible, due to it being covered by the image of God, is the principle of quote-unquote fear. Something we've touched on in the previous episodes, lightly, indirectly, but directly now just want to focusing on that idea, that thought of fear. Not literal fear as in rattling of the knees, as in shaking, as in afraid, as in scared, as in traumatized. This fear is a fear of awe. This fear is a fear of respect. How do you respect what is invisible? How can you respect what is invisible? Everything that we do concerning our belief, we make it visible. Doesn't matter how invisible that visible is, we make it visible. We make it visible through some sort of esoteric, some sort of theology, some sort of theory, some sort of opinion. We make it very visible. Yet, within the mind of the scriptures, which is giving substance of wisdom, there is no body to that. There's no body to that. Yet, being human, one of the things that we like to do as human beings is we like to categorize things. So, for example, if somebody tells you that they don't like to eat a certain thing, you would just say, oh no, so you're vegetarian. Oh no, so you're doing keto. You know, as human beings, I'm just using that as an example. We like to categorize things because that's what really helps us make sense of our world. But when it comes to this, when it comes to what the Bible's philosophy is, if we're not willing to let go of that categorization that we so naturally do, we will be stuck in that repeating cycle that the author of the book of Genesis lets us know that we will get caught up in. The idea being, the thought being, that by being able to let go of the conversation, as Ephesians chapter 4 says, gradually pruning and purging the character therein, We are to arrive at the sense of quote-unquote life, which life only takes shape through fear. The conversation taking shape through fear is an idea that is spread out throughout the entire Bible. May not be so easy to see, but once you get past quote-unquote Moses, you're able to actually see the mindset that the Bible has. Because remember, I'm always saying, and it's really difficult to always say when the audience may not know personally, but the way that the Bible operates is that the Bible likes to give wrong first, so that by understanding wrong, right can be understood thereafter. So as you're reading the Bible is covered by philosophy of religious law. Bible is covered by Moses. That's seemingly the way things ought to be. But is that honestly the case? And I'm just going to run through some verses to show that. To show that fear, the concept of fear, which is not fear as in afraid, which is not fear as in traumatized, this is fear as in awe, this is fear as in regard. How do you regard what is invisible? Because human beings like to make what is invisible visible, thereby canceling out the experience. How do you reverence, how do you revere, how do you regard, how do you honor what is invisible? Not that difficult to gather, but the answer is through fear. Looking at Hebrews 12:28, wherefore we, receiving a kingdom which cannot be moved, let us have grace whereby we may serve God acceptably with reverence and godly fear. 2 Corinthians 7 verse 1, having therefore these promises, dearly beloved, let us cleanse ourselves from all filthiness of the flesh and spirit, perfecting holiness in the fear of God. Isaiah 33, 5 and 6. Isaiah 33, 5 and 6. The Lord is exalted, for he dwelleth on high. He hath filled Zion with judgment and righteousness. And wisdom and knowledge shall be the stability of thy times, and strength of salvation. The fear of the Lord is his treasure. Proverbs 9 and verse 10, a verse brought up in the previous episode. Proverbs 9 and verse 10, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the holy is understanding. So this is all very plain. And the Bible is divided into two, as I always like to say. The Bible is divided into two, not telling the reader what to choose, but giving the reader an understanding on what to frame themselves around due to preference. Due to preference. Bible is divided by two minds. One mind is Moses, the next mind is wisdom. One mind is Moses, the next mind is fear. What will you live by? That's the question the author of the book of Genesis in chapters 2 and 3 they want their reader to really hear them asking. You're seeing movement of serpent figure. You're seeing image of God. You're seeing all of these things, tree manner of life, tree manner of knowledge of good and evil. You're seeing these things that the author of the book of Genesis is pointing towards. Their main message is seeing all of this. And then understanding that the consequence for relying on the concept of good and evil is imaginary images joined to a Baal. What will you now do? What is left to do? What could have been done different to avoid the consequence of religious delusion, which imaginary figures joined by a Baal absolutely is, which every single generation falls victim to, mercilessly, relentlessly, continually? It is a given and inevitable. What can you do knowing that this is the trend? What should have been done different? What could have they done different? The answer is they could have feared. But you can't have fear without something that these verses point out, and especially Proverbs 9 and 10, which is wisdom, because the beginning thereof of fear, of quote-unquote awe for the living God, is wisdom. If you do not have wisdom in what the character of the living God is, you cannot regard anything concerning what the intended experience of the scriptures actually is and should be. The beginning is a wise understanding on the language and on the context and on the nature of the substance contained within the core of the scriptures.
We are to have, as is said and believed when it comes to life and religion, faith. But when it comes to exercising faith, a very crucial aspect of having and exercising faith isn't mentioned. In order to have faith in anything, we need to know what we would have faith in. This book looks into how the Bible defines the process of justification. We are supposed to know what we believe. Personal knowledge will bring life to our experience with the Bible. Get Justification to know how to safely take care of your faith.
The author writing the first book of John, they ask an interesting question. 1 John 4, verse 20. 1 John chapter 4 and verse 20. They ask an interesting question. 1 John 4 and 20 reads, "If a man say, I love God, and hateth his brother, he is a liar. He that loveth not his brother whom he hath seen, how can he love God whom he hath not seen? He that loveth not his brother whom he hath seen, how can he love God whom he hath not seen?" If we are walking around saying that we know God, that we know Bible, that we acknowledge God, that we acknowledge mind within the Bible, how can we know? How can we know what we cannot actually see? Has the Bible suddenly grown lips with a mouth to confess itself to any of us? Literally. Has the Bible ever done that? May be the case, to where our opinion of what we are reading is a confession of what the Bible is actually saying, or is what the Bible, or of what the Bible actually is, but that's not the case. That is simply us, running wild with our opinion and the theories that we concoct from it. The Bible has never once said anything that we believe or opine, yet that is what we are running with. And we are running with it because it emotionally makes sense. We are running with it because we have felt a certain way, and so because we feel that way, that's what the Bible says. We are running with it because that's just something that we think we've gone through, and that's what we believe the Bible's articulating, and so there's whatever you want to say about that. But the author writing the book of Genesis is getting to, it wants their reader to get to a point where they're questioning themselves. Knowing that how this is the way the religious world works, it operates, what are you now going to do to know what is invisible? This is the scenario. Every single generation, every age, it is timeless. This will repeat, writes the author writing the book of Genesis chapters 2 and 3. It is fact. And again, we don't really have to question them. We can just look through history to see that it is fact. What they are saying is fact. Every generation, chosen garden meets serpent. Serpent introduces image of God in new and in undeniably lovely ways, causing that chosen garden to drift away from its intended purpose to place into its system image of God presented in the nature or character of repeating serpent role. So they're giving us history. Repeating history is what the author of the book of Genesis is doing. This is unchanging. This is unchanging. Nothing's going to change with this. That's just how things go. Question is that they're wanting their reader to understand is what are you going to do now? Because this is how that goes, what could have been done different? What could have been done different is the entrance of fear into the equation. But fear takes something. You can't just respect what is invisible out of nowhere. Moses isn't going to do that for you. Moses let you know that not even he will last long enough, and I'm not saying he, the physical or whatever you want to chuck that up to be, the philosophy of the religious law will not even last that long because there is to be one that is to appear whose words will be the words of the living God. So not even Moses advertised the placement of his way to last forever. Which way that Moses gave to the Israelites was the way of the religious world. It will not last, because that's not the beginning of anything. The beginning of everything is understanding and wisdom. And so too is one's relationship with the invisible living God. Call that whatever you want to call that figure whoever you want to call it. One's relationship is not. Bible's mind. This isn't me speaking. This is Bible's mind. The conversation is not to be guided by law. It cannot. If it does, it will move, it will lead itself into realms of delusion that will take away the experience that it's supposed to be having. And the experience that it's supposed to be having is one of wisdom, of which the beginning will lead that conversation into understanding not simply whatever, but what is for its individual experience personally, that what is supposed to come out of it will, and not for its own sake or benefit, but for other minds encountering it. So how can I say what I'm saying is legitimate? I'm going to run through some more verses, and sure, the context of these verses, I'm pulling them, but despite how they are pulled, you can place them in their context fits, and you will get that as we hear them. Hosea 6:6. Hosea 6:6. I desired mercy and sacrifice. I desired mercy, not sacrifice. I desired mercy and not sacrifice, and the knowledge of God more than burnt offerings. Now, I'm always saying that there's two minds within the Bible. One mind wants their reader to believe in offerings and sacrifices as being just that, the key to the divine. The other mind within the Bible, it lets you know that the route or the routine by offerings and sacrifices plateaus the experience. What is actually demanded is understanding. The correct offering and sacrifice is the offering and sacrifice of the mind, of the body of devotion. Not of any animal, not of anything bloodless, not of a wafer, not of anything written on the forehead. The correct sacrifice is the body of the belief. Kill your body of belief. Kill it. Because if not, you're going to end up like that pair in the garden, and the consequence that they suffered, it's going to be yours. What's the consequence? The consequence is barred from understanding quote-unquote life, with imaginary images and a veil keeping the way, keeping you from that way. Looking at Isaiah 1:11 and 12. Isaiah 1:11 and 12. To what purpose is the multitude of your sacrifices unto me, saith the Lord? I am full of the burnt offerings of rams and the fat of fed beasts, and I delight not in the blood of bullocks or of rams or of he-goats. When you come to appear before me, who hath required this at your hand to tread my courts? Now that's funny, because you're the one that required it, right, Lord? Right? Aren't you the one that told us to do this? The answer is no. In the book of Jeremiah, it is written, I told them not anything concerning burnt offerings and sacrifices. That's why, contextually, when you're reading this verse that I just read in the book of Isaiah, it reads, when you come to appear before me, who hath required this? Who? It is not I that presented this to you. Who? Answer is, once again, there are two philosophies within the Bible. The one speaking here is not that philosophy that we are generally familiar with. The one speaking here is that other philosophy. Who hath required this? That other philosophy required it. That other philosophy called Moses. That other philosophy. It is not I. The living creator, as the author is here in the book of Isaiah, perpetuating or trying to mouth, it is not the living creator that is initiating this for their host to do or to think or to fathom is well for their devotional well-being. It is not I. Amos 5:23-26. Amos 5:23-26. Take thou away from me the noise of thy songs, for I will not hear the melody of thy viols. Thy viols. But let judgment run down his waters, and righteousness is a mighty stream. Have you, now listen to this context, have you offered unto me sacrifices and offerings in the wilderness for 40 years, O house of Israel? That's a question. Why is that a question? Have you offered unto me sacrifices and offerings in the wilderness for 40 years, O house of Israel? But here's the answer to the question. But you have borne the tabernacle of your Moloch and hewn your images, the star of your God, which you made to yourselves. All of those offerings and sacrifices that Moses concocted and all of this that went on, that wasn't to the individual that said, I am that I am. That was in dedication to another. Again, there are two minds within the Bible. One mind flows towards what Moses concocted. The other does not. The other mind flows to what the author of Genesis chapter 2 and 3 is articulating, which is above religious law, above subjecting the devotional conversation to the slavery of religious law, is the liberty of understanding.
A Fallen Record, The Christian Transgression, is a book bringing history and the Bible together. We all want to know how the Christian religion began. But does the Bible show error occurring in the early church? This book looks at the origin of the Christian movement, and in a way where philosophical context is shown from the Bible. Learn Christian history from the narrative given by the Bible, and learn how the Bible shows the Christian religion taking another path. In A Fallen Record, The Christian Transgression.
And so when it does come to understanding, is understanding free? Because when you think liberty, you think freedom. When you think liberty, you think no more chains. Is that the truth? Is wisdom without chain? Is understanding and knowledge without chain? And when I'm saying chain, I'm saying burden. Looking at Proverbs 2:3-5. Looking at Proverbs 2:3-5. Proverbs 2:3-5 reads, Yea, if thou criest after knowledge and liftest up thy voice for understanding, if thou seekest her as silver and searchest for her as for hid treasures, then shalt thou understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. What is this saying? If thou seek for her as silver, search for her as for hid treasures. What does that mean in 2024? Every day we spend our life chasing money. Every day we do everything for money. Sometimes we put our conscience away for money. Just for $1 to pay for whatever we need to pay for in this life. We sacrifice conscience sometimes for money. Bible is saying in 2024, if you would sacrifice your conscience for understanding as you do for money, then you would understand what the regard of the knowledge of the living God is. Because the fear of the Lord is nothing but knowledge, as that last verse highlights. Then thou shalt find the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. Then shalt thou understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. How? By seeking for understanding as you would for money. by crying after knowledge as you would for money, by lifting up your voice for understanding as you would for silver and gold. If we can commit our conversation to pursuing understanding, the same way that life and society forces us to pursue currency, well, our conversation would be in a better state. Our conversation would be in a way that would make us, and when I say us, the essence within us, content to maintain its living existence. The greater wealth, and I understand that there is, money is a necessity. I understand that there are a lot of necessities that we have in this life, but the greater wealth that we possess, and especially if we will go through this process that the scriptures are pointing us toward, which is the process of understanding self personally and devotionally, the greater wealth is understanding and taking the understanding that we're understanding and rewiring it to our own living experience so that a greater source of understanding, a greater wisdom can come forth from what we are processing. Taking what the scriptures are giving to us, rehashing them, and then recycling them throughout our life, gaining wisdom and understanding from what these words are saying, putting ourselves aside, putting every categorization that we have aside, and allowing the Bible's mind to categorize for us so that we can take what we are getting as wisdom and as understanding, making that sure, and continuing that cycle, we will develop what is called quote-unquote fear, which fear is actually knowledge of the living God. This is how we can honor what is invisible. We can honor what is invisible only by understanding. We see one another every single day. We see one another every single day. The greatest way that we can commune with one another, the greatest way that we can regard one another is not by what we see of one another, it is by what we observe within one another. That's what keeps us pulled towards one another, and in a way that is respectful and in a way that can lead to that other respecting themselves. The Bible wants us to realize that that same dichotomy that we give to other physical human beings, we need to give to the devotional body. When we can do that, when we can give that same respect and that same way to the body of our understanding, that's when that marriage between our human and our devotional being can take place. We can then regard ourselves and this living existence the way that we ought to, and understand the point of why we are here and existing, instead of wasting it away on a theory held together by some religious law. Author of the book of Genesis is introducing to their reader the foundation of devotional slavery and is asking, seeing how this goes, what will you personally do about it? Now the answer is, and the author of the book of Genesis and the mind at the core of the Bible, they want their audience to say, I will learn fear. But that also involves stepping aside from self, stepping out of self to allow the devotional conversation the time that it needs to grow. Not just alone with the scriptures, also personally and intimately. Because then and only then can that fear lead to the type of regard and respect that the mind within the scriptures that it is after, and that we can then take that and simply live.